The Orion Coalition Assembly had witnessed declarations of war, peace treaties that reshaped civilizations, and first contact ceremonies that united entire star systems. Yet on this day, the enormous circular chamber felt heavier than ever before. Sunlight streamed through the towering crystalline dome above, casting brilliant rays across polished marble floors and the floating holographic map of known space suspended in the chamber's center. Hundreds of delegates representing more than 80 intelligent species filled their seats, their conversations blending into a low hum of uncertainty. Every glowing marker on the map represented a civilization, but one expanding crimson frontier drew every eye. The Kar Dominion had spent the last 60 years conquering system after system, absorbing worlds with ruthless efficiency. Now its crimson border had reached the edge of human-controlled space. Silence fell as the presiding speaker announced, "The floor recognizes High Marshal Varkani of the Kar Dominion." The towering alien stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had never tasted defeat. His broad shoulders were covered in dark ceremonial armor etched with symbols representing every conquered civilization. His yellow eyes swept across the chamber before settling on the holographic display. "The Dominion has united hundreds of divided worlds," Varkani declared, his deep voice echoing through the assembly. "Where others saw chaos, we brought order. Where others clung to outdated borders, we forged prosperity." Several allied delegates nodded cautiously while many others remained silent. Varkani raised one claw toward the blue sphere representing Earth. "Only one insignificant power continues to deny our rightful expansion." Before anyone could respond, another figure calmly rose from her seat. Ambassador Celine Ross adjusted the silver insignia on her dark diplomatic uniform and walked toward the center platform. Unlike Varkani, she carried no weapon and wore no decorations celebrating military victories. Her calm expression contrasted sharply with the tension filling the room. "High Marshal," she began politely, "Earth has never denied peaceful travel, scientific exchange, or commerce. Thousands of civilian vessels enter our space every year. Students study on our worlds. Diplomats are always welcome." Varkani smiled coldly. "Then why forbid military fleets?" Celine met his gaze without hesitation. "Because our borders exist to prevent war, not encourage it." Soft whispers spread throughout the chamber. An elderly delegate from the Aquatic Thalen Collective slowly raised one webbed hand. "Ambassador Ross speaks the truth," he said. "For nearly 2 centuries every government has respected the Helios boundary." Another representative added quietly, "Even our exploration fleets request permission before entering." Varkani laughed, the sound carrying across the chamber. "Interesting. Entire governments fear a line drawn in empty space." "It is not fear," replied the Thalen elder. "It is wisdom." Varkani's expression hardened. "No civilization possesses defenses capable of stopping the Dominion." Celine folded her hands calmly behind her back. "High Marshal, Earth has no desire for conflict." "Then surrender your borders." "No." The single word hung in the air. Varkani took one deliberate step closer. "Do you truly believe humanity can stop 8,000 warships?" Celine's voice never changed. "I believe you should never cross the Helios boundary with hostile intent." "Is that a threat?" "No," she answered quietly. "It is a warning." The chamber erupted into murmurs. A representative from the Archon Republic leaned toward the council speaker. "Surely negotiation is still possible." "It is," Celine replied immediately. "Earth welcomes negotiations today, tomorrow, or next year. We ask only one thing." "And that is?" Varkani asked mockingly. "Do not send an armed fleet into our solar system." Varkani spread his arms dramatically. "Listen to yourselves. An entire council frightened by a species that has fought no major war in over a century." Celine lowered her eyes for a brief moment before answering. "Peace should never be mistaken for weakness." The marshal turned away dismissively. "History remembers conquerors, ambassador. Not cowards hiding behind invisible borders." Without another word, he strode from the council platform. Around the chamber, worried conversations immediately broke out. Several delegates hurried toward Celine. The Thalen elder sighed heavily. "Will he listen?" "No," Celine admitted. "Then why continue trying?" She looked toward the holographic image of Earth's solar system. "Because every life saved is worth one more attempt." Far away from the political arguments unfolding in the coalition assembly, Earth itself appeared peaceful. Blue oceans shimmered beneath drifting white clouds while thousands of civilian transports moved freely between orbital stations surrounding the planet. Cargo vessels departed for distant colonies. Passenger liners welcomed tourists from dozens of alien civilizations. To any observer, there was little to suggest that humanity expected the largest invasion fleet in modern history. High above Earth, inside the Orbital Defense Command, Commander Elias Ward stood before an enormous panoramic window overlooking the planet. His short gray hair reflected years of service, while the quiet confidence in his posture came from surviving battles few others remembered. Around him, officers monitored countless tactical displays, yet the command center remained surprisingly calm. Lieutenant Maya Chen glanced repeatedly between her sensor console and the incoming intelligence reports. Finally, she broke the silence. "Sir, long-range surveillance confirms the Dominion fleet has entered the outer approach." Elias nodded once. "No change in readiness?" "No." She hesitated. "They outnumber every active defense fleet we have." "I know. They've conquered hundreds of systems. I've read the reports." Maya frowned. "Forgive me, Commander, but why does everyone seem so calm?" Elias finally looked at her. "Lieutenant, how long have you served?" 3 years. "And before the academy?" "I studied military history." He smiled faintly. "Modern history." She blinked. "Sir?" He turned back toward the stars. "The dangerous lessons were written much earlier." One of the senior operators interrupted. "Commander, encrypted transmission from Ambassador Ross." The message appeared as a holographic recording. Celine's expression remained composed despite the exhaustion visible in her eyes. "They refused every proposal," she reported. "Marshal Varkani has formally announced his intention to cross the Helios boundary within 6 hours." Elias nodded once. "I expected as much. I am sorry. There is nothing to apologize for." She paused before adding quietly, "I hope the warnings were enough." "They never are." The transmission ended. Maya looked puzzled. "Sir, what exactly is the Helios boundary?" For several seconds, Elias remained silent. Finally, he answered, "A promise." "A promise?" "One humanity made to itself long before we ever met another civilization." She waited for him to continue. He didn't. An alarm chimed softly. The operations officer spoke. "Dominion fleet approaching the Helios boundary." Every screen in the command center displayed thousands of crimson symbols advancing in perfect formation toward the edge of human-controlled space. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship, High Marshal Varkani stood proudly as stars drifted across the massive forward viewport. "Boundary reached," one officer announced. Varkani folded his arms. "Proceed." Thousands of warships crossed the invisible line together. Nothing happened. No hidden weapons fired. No mines detonated. No defense fleet emerged. Only endless silence greeted them. Laughter spread across the bridge. "I expected more," one captain joked. "So did I," another replied. Varkani smiled triumphantly. "The humans have spent centuries hiding behind myths." Back in Earth's Orbital Defense Command, Maya stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "They crossed." "Yes," Elias answered calmly. "They're still advancing." "Yes." They weren't stopped. Elias looked once more at the crimson icons slowly moving deeper into the solar system. Then, without the slightest change in his expression, he gave a single quiet order. "Notify every command sector." The room became perfectly silent. "Tell them," Elias said, "the warnings have been ignored." The Dominion fleet advanced deeper into human-controlled space with disciplined precision, its 8,000 warships stretching across millions of kilometers like a river of crimson steel flowing through the darkness. Massive carriers occupied the center of the formation while battleships, missile cruisers, and escort destroyers maintained perfect tactical spacing around them. High Marshal Varkani stood proudly on the bridge of his flagship, Dominion's Wrath, watching the holographic tactical map update every few seconds. Every waypoint beyond the Helios boundary was being secured exactly as planned. No mines, no ambushes, no resistance. Several officers exchanged confident smiles. "Human intelligence has been greatly exaggerated," one captain remarked. Another laughed. "They spent centuries frightening the galaxy with ghost stories." Varkani folded his arms. "Fear is often the final weapon of weak civilizations. Continue our advance. We will establish orbital superiority over Earth within 72 hours." Far behind the advancing armada, The last communication buoy stationed near the Helios boundary transmitted one final encrypted message before falling silent. Deep beneath the icy crust of Europa, inside a facility absent from every public star chart, ancient reactors awakened for the first time in 168 years. Across the solar system, similar events unfolded in absolute silence. Hidden bunkers beneath the moon unlocked armored vaults. Thousands of dormant satellites hidden among harmless communication arrays quietly powered on. Gigantic structures buried inside hollowed asteroids rotated into alignment with mathematical precision. Nothing exploded. Nothing announced itself. The solar system simply woke up. Inside Earth's Orbital Defense Command, Lieutenant Maya Chen stared as status indicators changed from gray to green across an enormous display covering the operations room wall. Entire sectors that had appeared inactive moments earlier now displayed thousands of classified installations. "Sir," she whispered, barely believing what she was seeing. "I never knew these stations existed." Commander Elias Ward kept his hands behind his back as he observed the same display. Very few people do. Maya looked around the room. Even veteran officers were speaking only in short, calm reports. There were no frantic orders, no shouting, no rushing between consoles. It felt less like the beginning of a war and more like the execution of a plan prepared long ago. An operations officer stood. "Commander, all planetary defense sectors report readiness." Another voice followed immediately. "Lunar Shield Network online. Mars Defense Grid synchronized. Outer asteroid arrays responding. Jovian Listening Network active." Maya blinked in surprise. Jovian Listening Network? I thought that was dismantled decades ago. Elias allowed himself the faintest smile. So did everyone else. Several million kilometers away, Dominion reconnaissance squadrons continued pushing ahead of the main fleet. Their task was simple: identify hidden military installations before the larger ships arrived. Commander Reth, leader of Scout Group 7, leaned over his navigation display. "Sector appears clear," his navigator reported. "No hostile contacts." Reth nodded. "Maintain course. Launch long-range probes." Moments later, dozens of automated drones accelerated into the darkness. Their sensor feeds streamed back normally for several seconds before every transmission froze simultaneously. "Signal interruption?" Reth asked. "Negative," replied the communications officer. "The drones still exist. I just can't see them." Before anyone could investigate further, every drone disappeared from the tactical display. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone. Silence settled over the bridge. "Recover telemetry," Reth ordered. The technician shook his head nervously. "There is no telemetry to recover, Commander. It's as though they never launched." On the flagship, Varkani received the report with visible annoyance. "Equipment malfunction?" he asked. Fleet Intelligence Director Salvik hesitated. "Possibly, Marshal. Scout Group 7 recommends replacing their sensor arrays." Varkani dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. "Replace them and continue. We will not delay an entire campaign because of faulty reconnaissance drones." Back at Orbital Defense Command, Maya watched new symbols appear across the solar system. Hundreds. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. "Those aren't warships," she observed. Elias nodded. "No. Then what are they?" "Observers." She frowned. "Observers? Every movement the Dominion makes from this point forward will be recorded." Maya looked puzzled. "Why record them instead of attacking?" Elias answered without taking his eyes off the display. "Because understanding your enemy is more valuable than surprising him." Another officer interrupted. "Commander, gravitational stations report synchronization complete." Maya turned sharply. "Gravitational stations?" Elias finally walked toward the central holographic display. "The solar system isn't defended by walls, Lieutenant." He enlarged the map, revealing hundreds of nearly invisible lines stretching between planets, moons, and asteroid belts. "It's defended by geography." Maya studied the display carefully. "Those lines. Artificial gravitational corridors," Elias explained. "Most ships don't even realize they're following them." She looked confused. "You can reshape navigation routes?" "Not completely," Elias replied. "Only enough to encourage predictable decisions." Maya slowly understood. "You're guiding them." Elias nodded once. "Exactly where we want them to go." Meanwhile, aboard Scout Group 7, Commander Reth frowned as his navigation officer spoke again. "Commander, Our star charts don't match visual observation. Explain. According to our instruments, that pulsar should be behind us. Reth looked through the forward viewport. The distant pulsar shone directly ahead. He frowned. Recalibrate. Already done. Use manual stellar triangulation. Minutes passed before the officer looked up again, his expression noticeably pale. Manual calculations agree with the visual readings. Reth stared at the display. Then why does our navigation computer disagree? Nobody answered. Throughout the Dominion fleet, similar reports quietly multiplied. Some ships found themselves drifting a few thousand kilometers away from assigned positions despite flawless engine performance. Others discovered that laser communication beams required constant realignment. Formation commanders blamed calibration errors. Engineers blamed software updates. No one yet suspected the solar system itself was subtly disrupting every assumption their navigation doctrine depended upon. Then the first ship disappeared. It wasn't a battleship or a carrier. It was a small reconnaissance frigate assigned to verify an asteroid field ahead of the main fleet. One moment it acknowledged routine communications. The next, every signal ceased. The vessel vanished from sensors without an explosion, distress call, or detectable debris. Fleet Command immediately ordered nearby escorts to investigate. They found empty space. One captain reported nervously, "Marshal, there are no wreckage fragments. No radiation. No weapons signatures. Nothing." Varkan's eyes narrowed. "A cloaking device?" Salvik shook his head. "Our sensors detect no hidden vessels." At Orbital Defense Command, a quiet chime echoed across the operations room. An officer stood. "Commander. First contact event confirmed." Maya looked toward Elias. "Was that us?" she asked. Elias remained silent for several seconds before replying. "No." "Then what happened?" His expression remained unreadable. "The border happened." Maya stared at him. "Sir, what exactly is Protocol Asterion?" Elias finally met her eyes. "Every civilization builds stronger weapons after surviving a war." He paused. "Humanity survived wars so terrible that we built something different." "Different how?" she asked softly. Elias turned toward the glowing map of the solar system, where tiny Dominion symbols had already begun drifting into carefully separated clusters. "We didn't build a weapon to destroy invading fleets." He watched another crimson icon suddenly vanish from the display. "We built a border that invaders could never truly leave." Far ahead of the main Dominion armada, another scout group reported the impossible. 3 more vessels had disappeared without warning. No battle. No explosions. No evidence. Only empty space where ships had existed moments before. For the first time since crossing the Helios boundary, laughter vanished from the bridges of the Dominion fleet, replaced by an unsettling silence that even High Marshal Varkan could no longer ignore. The invasion had entered human space expecting a battle. Instead, it had entered a mystery. And mysteries were far more dangerous than enemies you could actually see. Silence spread across the Dominion fleet far faster than panic ever could. Within 6 hours of crossing the Helios boundary, 4 reconnaissance vessels and 2 electronic warfare frigates had disappeared without leaving behind wreckage, distress beacons, or even residual radiation. Every known weapon left evidence. Even the most advanced cloaking technology produced measurable energy distortions. Yet every investigation returned the same impossible conclusion: nothing had happened. High Marshal Varkan stood motionless before the tactical display aboard Dominion's Wrath, studying the empty spaces where 6 friendly identification markers had once existed. Around him, experienced officers spoke in unusually restrained voices. Confidence had not vanished, but certainty had. "Marshal," Fleet Intelligence Director Salvik reported, "we've compared every sensor log. There are no signs of enemy vessels within 10 million kilometers of the disappearances." Varkan's eyes narrowed. "Then we are missing something." "Yes, Marshal. Find it." The fleet continued advancing, but Varkan altered his formation for the first time in his military career. Instead of a broad spearhead designed to overwhelm defenders, he ordered tighter defensive groupings. Cruisers moved closer to carriers. Destroyers expanded their sensor coverage. Fighter wings remained on constant alert. To many officers, the adjustment felt unnecessary against an enemy that had yet to fire a single shot, but none questioned the order. Varkan had earned his reputation by surviving the unexpected. "Increased passive scanning," he commanded. "No active emissions unless authorized." If humanity is hiding, I want them searching for us, not the other way around. Far away, inside Orbital Defense Command above Earth, Commander Elias Ward watched the Dominions maneuver with quiet approval. Lieutenant Maya Chen looked surprised. They're changing formation. Elias nodded slightly. As expected. They're becoming cautious. Good. Maya looked at him in confusion. Good? Elias enlarged the tactical map. The once perfect crimson spearhead had begun compressing into dense defensive clusters. Thin blue lines appeared across the display, connecting planets, moons, and asteroid fields in patterns Maya had never seen before. Lieutenant, Elias asked, what happens when a large army marches through unfamiliar mountains? She considered the question. Their movement slows. Why? Because they stay together. Elias nodded again. Exactly. Fear compresses formations. Compressed formations become predictable. Maya stared at the display as the realization settled in. Humanity wasn't forcing the Dominion into these formations. Their own caution was doing it for them. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, enormous doors weighing thousands of tons slowly opened inside an ancient military complex abandoned on every public record. Rows of autonomous maintenance drones emerged first, inspecting systems that had remained dormant for generations. Behind them, kilometer-long rail platforms rotated toward firing positions hidden beneath the rust-colored landscape. Similar scenes unfolded across dozens of locations throughout the solar system. Asteroids shifted by only a few meters. Movements so small they escaped ordinary observation but enough to alter gravitational currents flowing through nearby space. Small satellites unfolded structures resembling shimmering metallic petals, silently projecting fields impossible to detect unless one knew exactly where to look. Maya watched classified reports arrive faster than she could read them. Commander, these installations, when were they built? Elias remained focused on the tactical display. Most were completed over 200 years ago. She blinked. 2 centuries? Some are older. Why has no one ever mentioned them? Elias looked toward Earth through the command center's massive observation window. Because they were never meant to impress anyone. They were built so they'd never need to be used. Aboard the Dominion cruiser Iron Resolve, Commander Reth struggled to make sense of increasingly contradictory sensor data. His navigation officer looked exhausted after hours of recalculations. Commander, our current position differs from Fleet Command's estimate by nearly 30,000 kilometers. Reth frowned. Impossible. I've verified it 6 times. Another officer interrupted. Long-range stars don't match projected coordinates either. Reth walked to the forward viewport. Familiar constellations appeared subtly different than expected. The changes were almost too small to notice individually, yet together they painted a disturbing picture. Send correction request to Fleet Command. The communications officer hesitated. Sir, our quantum relay is no longer synchronized. Use backup frequencies. Already attempted. Response? None. Across hundreds of Dominion vessels, similar reports flooded command channels. Navigation systems required constant manual correction. Formation spacing drifted despite perfect engine performance. Long-range communication suffered unexplained delays ranging from seconds to several minutes. Individually, each issue appeared minor. Collectively, they were slowly eroding the fleet's ability to function as a unified force. Back aboard Dominion's Wrath, Salvik approached Varkani carrying fresh reports. Marshal, every fleet division is reporting different star positions. Varkani looked up sharply. Different from what? From each other. Explain. Salvik activated a hologram showing 3 identical observations made simultaneously from different squadrons. Each displayed slight variations in stellar positions. That's impossible, one bridge officer muttered. Salvik nodded grimly. Unless every division is observing from slightly different locations than they believe. Varkani folded his arms. Are you suggesting our navigation systems are compromised? No, Marshal. Salvik hesitated before continuing. I believe space itself is. The bridge fell silent. Varkani stared at the hologram before speaking quietly. No civilization possesses technology capable of altering stellar navigation over this scale. Salvik answered carefully. Perhaps not intentionally, Marshal. Meaning? Perhaps we entered something we don't yet understand. At Orbital Defense Command, Maya could no longer hide her curiosity. Commander, what exactly happened 200 years ago? For the first time since the invasion began, Elias remained silent for several moments. When he finally spoke, his voice carried memories rather than pride. Humanity nearly went extinct. The operations room grew quieter. Not because of aliens, Elias continued. Because of ourselves. Maya listened intently. The solar extinction wars lasted almost 40 years. Rogue artificial intelligences turned entire planetary networks against us. Self-replicating nanomachines consumed cities. Engineered plagues spread faster than governments could respond. Human fleets fought other human fleets while civilization collapsed. Maya had studied history, but she had never heard this. Why wasn't this taught at the academy? Most records remain classified. Not because we're ashamed. Elias looked at the tactical display showing the advancing Dominion. But because no one should ever be tempted to repeat what we survived. He enlarged another hidden layer of the tactical map. Maya's eyes widened. The blue lines connecting the solar system suddenly transformed into an immense three-dimensional web surrounding every major planet, moon, asteroid belt, and gravitational junction. Thousands upon thousands of invisible corridors intertwined across billions of kilometers, creating something less like a defense network and more like a gigantic maze. This, Maya whispered. Elias nodded. The Helios boundary isn't a wall. It's a labyrinth. Every invasion follows predictable mathematics. Supply lines, formation doctrine, navigation assumptions. During the solar extinction wars we learned that destroying an enemy fleet is expensive. He paused before adding quietly, getting them lost is much cheaper. Before Maya could respond, alarms chimed softly across the command center. An operations officer stood. Commander, Dominion Fleet Delta has divided into 4 independent formations. Another officer immediately followed. Marshal Varkan's main force is redirecting toward the Jupiter corridor. A third voice added, 3 carrier groups have unknowingly entered separate gravitational channels. Elias looked at the display without surprise. The labyrinth is working. Millions of kilometers away, Varkan watched his own tactical display flicker. Entire battle groups that should have been flying in perfect formation now appeared scattered across different approach vectors. Navigation, he barked. Explain this immediately. His chief navigator swallowed nervously. Marshal, speak. We're no longer commanding one fleet. Varkan frowned. The navigator looked directly at him before finishing the sentence that changed everything. We're commanding dozens of isolated fleets, and I don't believe any of them know where the others truly are. For the first 3 days after crossing the Helios boundary, the Dominion fleet never encountered a single human warship. High Marshal Varkan found the silence more unsettling than open resistance. Every military campaign in his long career had followed a familiar pattern. The enemy either attacked desperately at the border or retreated toward population centers to make a final stand. Humanity had done neither. Instead, the solar system seemed determined to swallow his fleet piece by piece. Every hour brought new reports of isolated formations, delayed communications, and navigation errors that no engineer could explain. Worse still, reconnaissance vessels continued disappearing without warning. The labyrinth had not yet destroyed the invasion force, but it had accomplished something almost as dangerous. It had forced every Dominion commander to doubt the information appearing on their own screens. Aboard the Dominion's Wrath, Varkan slammed his fist onto the tactical table. Enough. The holographic map flickered as officers fell silent. If humanity refuses battle, then we will force it. He pointed toward one of the separated task groups. Admiral Kareth, take Battle Group 4 and sweep the nearby asteroid belt. Destroy every object larger than 50 meters. If the humans are hiding there, they will reveal themselves. Admiral Kareth saluted confidently. It will be done, Marshal. Varkan nodded. No more chasing ghosts. Hours later, Battle Group 4 entered the dense asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter. Hundreds of cruisers and destroyers spread into attack formations while heavy battleships remained behind to provide long-range support. Scanners show nothing, one sensor officer reported. Admiral Kareth smiled. Exactly what I'd expect from frightened prey. Begin saturation fire. Brilliant beams of plasma and streams of kinetic projectiles erupted from Dominion vessels, shattering dozens of harmless asteroids into glittering clouds of debris. The bombardment continued for nearly 10 minutes. Still nothing, the communications officer reported. Kareth allowed himself a satisfied grin. Signal the Marshal. We've cleared the sector. Before the transmission finished, every light on the bridge dimmed for a fraction of a second. What was that? Kareth asked. No idea, Admiral. Then the first Dominion destroyer exploded. Not from the front. Not from above. A tungsten projectile traveling at impossible speed punched completely through the ship before anyone detected it. The destroyer split into two burning halves as atmosphere and debris scattered into space. Enemy contact. Someone shouted. Where? No visual. A second impact struck a cruiser, tearing through its reactor compartment before alarms could activate. The vessel vanished inside a blinding sphere of white light. Kareth stared in disbelief. Locate the firing platform. We can't. Then fire in every direction. Hundreds of Dominion weapons discharged simultaneously, illuminating the asteroid belt with blinding flashes. Nothing fired back. For nearly 30 seconds, silence returned. Then another railgun slug smashed through the bridge of a heavy cruiser nearly 2,000 kilometers away. One shot. One kill. Inside Orbital Defense Command, Maya watched the engagement unfold through classified tactical feeds. Tiny blue symbols representing hidden human defense stations appeared only briefly before disappearing again. They're using railguns, she observed. Elias nodded. Mass drivers. Why not missiles? Missiles leave trails. Energy weapons? Easy to detect. Maya watched another Dominion cruiser lose power after a precisely aimed kinetic strike disabled its engines instead of destroying it. They're only firing once before relocating. Elias folded his arms. Every station knows its survival depends on remaining invisible. Far inside the asteroid belt, concealed beneath layers of rock and alloy, Colonel Rebecca Hayes monitored her targeting display. Her underground command bunker had existed for nearly 180 years without being discovered. Target Alpha disabled, her weapons officer reported. Reactor strike successful. Hayes nodded. Relocate firing array. Massive electromagnetic rails folded back into armored chambers while the entire installation shifted deeper inside the asteroid using concealed propulsion systems. A young technician looked amazed. Colonel, they're firing everywhere except at us. Hayes smiled faintly. Because they're looking for a ship. She pointed upward. They still don't realize the asteroid itself is the weapon. Back aboard Dominion's Wrath, Varkani received casualty reports with growing frustration. Battle Group 4 had lost 12 ships in less than 15 minutes. The attackers remained completely unseen. How? Varkani demanded. Salvik displayed the recovered sensor data. Marshal, the projectiles have no engine signatures. They're simply accelerated metal. Varkani frowned. Primitive weapons? Primitive, Salvik admitted, but devastating. Another officer interrupted. Marshal, the firing locations keep changing. Ships? No. Stationary positions. Varkani's eyes narrowed. Stationary positions don't move. Salvik answered quietly. These do. The situation worsened as isolated Dominion formations encountered entirely different forms of resistance. Near Saturn, autonomous drone swarms emerged from the rings themselves. Thousands of small machines no larger than cargo containers darted between enemy vessels at incredible speeds. They carried no massive warheads. Instead, they targeted communication arrays, sensor dishes, and engine nozzles with surgical precision. One Dominion captain shouted in disbelief, "They're ignoring our reactors." His tactical officer answered while desperately trying to restore targeting systems. "They're blinding us first." Within minutes, an entire squadron found itself unable to coordinate even the simplest maneuver. Maya studied the reports arriving from across the solar system. "Commander, none of our attacks are aimed at destroying the fleet outright." Elias nodded. "Correct. We're dismantling it." "Exactly." He enlarged another section of the tactical display. More crimson symbols had changed color from bright red to dark orange, indicating damaged logistics. "Every missile they fire cannot be replaced." He pointed toward another icon. "Every damaged engine consumes repair materials." Another icon flashed yellow. "Every hour spent searching empty space burns fuel." Maya slowly understood. "We're fighting their supplies." Elias looked at her approvingly. "Wars are won by logistics long before they're won by weapons." Unfortunately, humanity was paying a price as well. A warning alarm echoed through the command center. "Commander," an officer shouted. "Defense Station Hermes has been detected." The tactical display zoomed toward a cluster of asteroids. Dominion battleships had finally identified one hidden installation. Dozens of plasma lances converged on the station before it could fully relocate. The asteroid erupted in a massive explosion that lit the surrounding sector. Maya watched several blue icons disappear forever. "Did they?" she whispered. Elias answered softly. 312 personnel. The room fell silent. No celebration followed the successful ambushes elsewhere. Every officer understood the cost. Far inside the destroyed station, Colonel Hayes watched emergency telemetry vanish from her screen. "Hermes is gone," a technician said quietly. Hayes closed her eyes for only a second. Then she looked back at the tactical display. "Continue firing." The technician hesitated. "They were our friends." Hayes nodded. "I know. They bought us another hour." On the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, Varkani finally realized the true nature of humanity's strategy. His fleet wasn't fighting one enormous defensive force. It was being hunted by thousands of independent defenders who knew every asteroid, moon, and gravitational corridor better than any invader ever could. He looked toward the glowing image of the solar system and spoke almost to himself. "They're not defending planets." Salvik looked at him. "They're defending time." Before the intelligence director could ask what he meant, another casualty report arrived. This time it wasn't another destroyed warship. It was something far worse. "Marshal." Salvik's voice had become noticeably tense. "Our supply convoy from the rear formations." Varkani turned sharply. "What about it?" The officer swallowed hard before answering. "It's gone." "Destroyed?" "No, Marshal." Salvik stared at the empty section of the tactical map where nearly 200 supply vessels should have been. "We can't find it." The fifth day of the invasion marked the moment the Dominion ceased acting like a conquering force and began behaving like survivors. Across the vast reaches of the solar system, isolated task groups searched desperately for supply convoys that no longer answered transmissions. Fuel reserves dropped below operational projections, missile inventories dwindled, and maintenance crews worked around the clock to keep damaged vessels combat-ready using salvaged components. Yet the greatest enemy was uncertainty. Every navigation correction produced a different result. Every attempt to reunite scattered formations ended with more confusion. The Helios boundary had done far more than separate the fleet. It had shattered the trust every captain placed in their own instruments. On the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, High Marshal Varkani stared at the tactical display with an expression none of his officers had ever witnessed before. It wasn't fear. It was frustration. Entire sections of the holographic map flickered with warning indicators. Orange symbols marked crippled squadrons. Yellow icons represented supply shortages. Gray markers identified ships whose exact locations remained unknown. "Report," Varkani ordered quietly. Fleet Intelligence Director Salvik took a slow breath before speaking. "Marshal, we have confirmed the loss of 193 supply vessels. We still don't know whether they were destroyed, captured, or redirected." Varkani's jaw tightened. "And our forward fleets? Running on emergency fuel allocations. Rear formations? Unable to reach them." The bridge remained silent until Varkani finally spoke again. "We crossed one border." He looked around at his officers. "How did we become trapped inside an entire star system?" Far away, aboard a damaged Dominion cruiser drifting near Saturn's rings, Captain Drax watched engineers struggle to restart an overloaded fusion reactor. Sparks showered across the engineering bay as emergency lights flickered. "How much fuel remains?" he asked. The chief engineer didn't look up. "Enough for one full combat burn. Perhaps two if we shut down life support in the unused sections." Drax closed his eyes briefly. "And ammunition?" "Rail batteries are empty. Missile reserves at 19%. Before he could reply, the communications officer hurried onto the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving another human transmission." Drax sighed. "Play it." A calm human voice filled every speaker aboard the ship. "This is Earth Defense Command broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Dominion personnel, your fleet is isolated. Further resistance will result in unnecessary casualties. Shut down your weapons and transmit surrender codes. Your crews will be treated under interstellar humanitarian law. Food, medical assistance, and evacuation will be provided. This message will repeat every 30 minutes. The recording ended. One young Dominion officer slammed his fist against the console. "They're trying to humiliate us." Another shook his head. "Or they're telling the truth." Drax remained silent for several moments before saying quietly, "Continue monitoring the transmission." Inside Orbital Defense Command, Maya looked toward Commander Elias after the latest surrender broadcast concluded. "Do you think they'll listen?" Elias watched the tactical display, where a handful of crimson symbols had already changed to blue, indicating surrendered vessels. "Some will. And the others? Pride is often heavier than armor." Maya frowned. "If they surrender now, why keep fighting?" Elias answered softly, "Because some commanders mistake surrender for failure." He paused before adding, "Sometimes the bravest decision in war is admitting you've already lost." Not everyone aboard the Dominion fleet agreed with Varkan's determination to continue. Deep inside Battle Group 9, several senior captains gathered aboard the carrier Iron Crown for an emergency conference. Admiral Sarek addressed them grimly. "We've received no reliable communication from Fleet Command in 19 hours. One captain crossed his arms. "Then we proceed independently." Another immediately objected. "With what fuel? We can't even locate the nearest resupply point." A third officer spoke more quietly. "The humans have offered surrender 4 times. The room erupted. "Never," shouted one commander. "We are Dominion." Another captain answered sharply. "Dominion crews are starving. Honor won't refill our reactors." Silence settled over the chamber as every officer realized the argument was no longer theoretical. At that same moment, hidden beneath the frozen surface of Callisto, Colonel Rebecca Hayes studied updated reconnaissance reports. "Enemy formations?" she asked. Her tactical officer enlarged the display. "Several Dominion groups are turning on one another. Sensor logs indicate internal weapons fire." Hayes nodded slowly. "The isolation has reached its breaking point." A young lieutenant looked surprised. "They're fighting each other?" Hayes sighed. "Fear always needs someone to blame." The situation deteriorated rapidly. Near the orbit of Jupiter, 2 Dominion destroyer squadrons mistakenly identified one another as disguised human vessels after corrupted identification signals failed to synchronize. Nervous gunners opened fire before officers could verify visual confirmation. By the time the mistake became clear, 6 ships had already been crippled. Across nearby sectors, similar incidents multiplied as damaged communication systems and unreliable navigation produced deadly misunderstandings. Salvik stood beside Varkan as fresh casualty reports arrived. "Marshal, we've lost 14 additional ships." Varkan looked up sharply. "Human attack?" Salvik hesitated. "No." "Then what?" "Friendly fire." For the first time since the campaign began, Varkan lowered his head. "This system," he murmured. Salvik remained silent. "It isn't defeating us with weapons." "No, Marshal. It's making us defeat ourselves." Back at Earth Defense Command, another alert sounded. "Commander," an operations officer announced, "Dominion flagship has altered course." Maya leaned forward. "Toward Earth?" The officer shook his head. "Toward the Central Command Relay Network near Mars." Elias studied the projected flight path. "They found one of the relay corridors." Maya looked concerned. "Can they destroy it?" "They can try." Within hours, the largest battle of the campaign erupted around a cluster of seemingly ordinary asteroids orbiting beyond Mars. Hidden beneath those rocks lay one of the command nodes coordinating portions of the Helios labyrinth. Varkan personally led nearly 400 surviving warships into the assault. Massive plasma bombardments shattered asteroid after asteroid while Dominion fighters flooded the battlefield. For the first time, human stealth destroyers revealed themselves openly, darting between debris fields and exchanging concentrated railgun fire with advancing battleships. Explosions illuminated the darkness as both sides suffered losses. Inside Orbital Defense Command, casualty indicators flashed continuously. Destroyer Resolute lost. Defense Platform Orion destroyed. Stealth Squadron 7 withdrawing. Maya watched blue icons disappear from the display. "They're breaking through." Elias remained calm. "Only because we allowed them to find something worth attacking." She looked at him. "This relay isn't the primary network, is it?" He shook his head. "No, it never was." Hours later, the battle ended. The Dominion succeeded in destroying the relay station. But when Varkan's engineers analyzed its systems, disappointment spread across the bridge. "It was a decoy," Salvik reported quietly. Varkan closed his eyes. "They sacrificed an entire station. To keep us busy," Salvik finished. Before anyone spoke again, another transmission from Earth arrived. This time it wasn't a general broadcast. It was addressed directly to the Dominion flagship. Commander Elias Ward appeared on the main viewscreen, standing calmly inside Orbital Defense Command. "High Marshal Varkani," he said, his voice steady, "your fleet has fought with determination. Your soldiers have shown courage. Do not waste any more of their lives." Varkani stepped closer to the screen. "You built this trap centuries ago. We built it so no extinction fleet could ever reach Earth. You expected someone like me." Elias answered without hesitation. "No. We hoped no one ever would." The transmission ended. Neither commander smiled. Both understood that the final battle was no longer about territory. It was about whether pride would claim more lives than the war already had. The war ended not with a triumphant explosion, but with silence. Across the solar system, the guns gradually fell quiet as one Dominion ship after another powered down its weapons and transmitted surrender codes. Some captains resisted until their reactors were nearly dry. Others finally accepted the truth after days without food, fuel, or contact with the rest of the fleet. The Helios labyrinth had accomplished exactly what it had been designed to do centuries earlier. It had not annihilated the invading force. It had broken its ability to wage war. Commander Elias Ward stood inside Orbital Defense Command watching hundreds of crimson symbols slowly change to blue across the tactical display. Lieutenant Maya Chen let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. Elias studied the map for several seconds before answering. "The fighting is." He looked toward the stars beyond the command center window. "Now comes the difficult part." On the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, High Marshal Varkani stood alone before the main viewport. The once proud flagship bore the scars of dozens of engagements. Entire sections of the hull had been patched with emergency plating, and several observation decks remained dark after losing power days earlier. Around him, exhausted officers waited for orders they already knew were coming. Salvik approached carefully. "Marshal. Engineering confirms we have fuel for less than 4 hours of sustained maneuvering." Varkani remained silent. "Weapons?" he finally asked. "Primary batteries are operational, but missile reserves are exhausted." "Life support?" "Stable. For another 6 days." Varkani nodded slowly before turning toward his bridge crew. Every face carried the same exhaustion. Every uniform bore the marks of a campaign that none of them had expected. "Open a channel to Earth Defense Command," he ordered. Moments later, Commander Elias appeared on the flagship's central display. Neither man spoke immediately. They simply regarded one another across millions of kilometers of space. Finally, Varkani broke the silence. "You could have destroyed us." Elias answered honestly. "Yes. Why didn't you?" The commander folded his hands behind his back. "Because our objective was never your destruction." Varkani gave a tired smile. "Only our defeat." Elias shook his head. "Our objective was to make sure your fleet could never threaten another world." Varkani lowered his eyes for a brief moment. "There is a difference. A very important one," Elias replied. The High Marshal drew a long breath before speaking the words no Dominion commander had uttered in generations. "This is High Marshal Varkani of the Kar Dominion Expeditionary Fleet." His voice echoed throughout every remaining Dominion vessel. "Effective immediately. I order all surviving units to cease hostilities." Around the fleet, officers froze as they listened. Varkani continued. "Transmit surrender codes to Earth Defense Command. Render medical assistance to the wounded. Destroy no records. Abandon no personnel." His voice became quieter. "This campaign is over." Inside Orbital Defense Command, no cheers erupted. No one celebrated. Instead, Elias simply nodded toward his operations staff. "Begin humanitarian operations." Maya looked surprised. "Immediately?" "Immediately." Within minutes, rescue ships departed from Earth, Mars, Luna, and the orbital shipyards. Instead of carrying weapons, they carried medical teams, engineers, food supplies, atmospheric processors, and repair equipment. Hospital vessels docked alongside damaged Dominion cruisers. Human doctors treated alien soldiers without asking which side they had fought for. Engineers restored failing life support systems before discussing prisoner transfers. Maya watched the rescue operations unfold on dozens of screens. "After everything they've done," she whispered. Elias answered gently, "The war ended the moment they stopped fighting. Everything after that determines what kind of civilization we are." Weeks later, Rescue missions from across the Orion Coalition finally received permission to enter the solar system. Delegations expecting to witness humanity celebrating a great military victory instead encountered something entirely different. Around Jupiter floated shattered warships from both sides awaiting salvage. Near Mars, engineers from Earth and the Dominion worked together to stabilize damaged reactors. Medical stations treated thousands of wounded regardless of species. Memorial beacons drifted quietly through space, each carrying the names of those who had never returned home. Ambassador Celine Ross greeted the arriving delegates with a solemn expression. "Welcome," she said softly. "I wish the circumstances were different." Inside the Galactic Council Assembly, the atmosphere had changed completely from the day Varkani had dismissed Earth's warnings. The Great Chamber remained just as magnificent, but now every delegate listened in complete silence as classified historical records appeared on the central holographic display. Images from the ancient solar extinction wars filled the room. Planets scarred by orbital bombardment. Cities consumed by self-replicating machines. Fleets of human ships battling one another beneath burning skies. Celine addressed the assembly calmly. These records remained sealed for centuries because humanity hoped no civilization would ever need to understand them. She looked around the chamber. We did not build the Helios boundary to dominate the galaxy. The hologram shifted to reveal the vast defensive labyrinth hidden throughout the solar system. We built it because we learned that survival depends upon preparation, not revenge. The Thalian elders slowly stood. Your warnings were completely truthful. Celine nodded. Every word. Another delegate lowered his head. And we doubted them. Many did, Celine answered. That is why history exists. Days later, the Orion Coalition unanimously approved a new interstellar agreement known as the Helios Accords. Every member civilization recognized the sovereign borders of all inhabited systems and pledged that no military fleet would ever again cross another world's defensive boundary without invitation. The treaty represented more than diplomacy. It acknowledged a lesson purchased at terrible cost. Before departing Earth under honorable custody, Varkani requested one final meeting with Commander Elias. They stood together inside a quiet observation gallery overlooking the blue curve of Earth. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Varkani asked, "Tell me honestly. When my fleet crossed your border, did you ever believe we could win?" Elias considered the question carefully. "I believed you could inflict terrible damage." Varkani looked surprised. "Even with your labyrinth? No defense is perfect." Elias looked toward the planet below. "If enough people are willing to die, every wall can eventually be breached." Varkani nodded slowly. "Then why were you so calm?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because panic never improves a defense plan that took 2 centuries to build." As Varkani prepared to leave, he paused beside the doorway. "I ignored your warning. Yes, I mistook your silence for weakness. Many have." The High Marshal looked back one final time. "I won't make that mistake again." Elias inclined his head respectfully. "I hope no one else does either." Months later, the scars of war slowly faded. Damaged stations were rebuilt. Trade routes reopened. Dominion prisoners returned home aboard escorted humanitarian convoys, carrying stories very different from the propaganda they had believed before the invasion. Humanity resumed its ordinary life. Merchant vessels crossed the Helios boundary every day after routine inspections. Scientists, diplomats, tourists, and students continued arriving from every corner of the galaxy. To them, the solar system appeared peaceful once again. Far beyond explored space, aboard a young exploration vessel from an emerging civilization, a junior officer studied an ancient archived report titled The Disappearance of the Dominion Fleet. He looked toward his captain with curiosity. "Commander, our charts show a direct route through human space. Should we test their border?" The older officer closed the report without hesitation. A faint smile crossed his face as he answered, "No. The wisest civilizations don't learn every lesson firsthand." Beyond the observation window, countless stars stretched into infinity, and among them, one small blue system continued to shine quietly, not as a symbol of conquest, but as a reminder that the strongest borders are the ones built by those who pray they never have to use them.